session. So I hope there we go. That was just on perfect timing. Um, we literally have just had Sanya be with us join our event in Melbourne. She was one of our keynote speakers, and well, as one thing, it was fantastic to have her there. But her sessions went down incredibly well, so we're super pleased to offer this particular masterclass. Sanya is coming to you right from Trinidad in Tobago. It's probably well, it's warm here in the UK if you're in the UK, but it's probably warmer in Trinidad. I would think, and it's 7 a.m. So thank you for getting up early and making this happen. This session from Sanya, who's the CEO and founder of Strategic Reliability Solutions, is a very pertinent one, I think, right now, and it's looking at how we transform engineering culture for women and get people involved. And obviously, at this time, it is really important to bring in all kinds of talent from wherever we possibly can. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to you right now. Sanya, please.
All right. Thank you so much, Ian. And it was such a pleasure being with the mainstream community in Australia. In my mind, that should have been yesterday, but it has been longer than that, unfortunately, since I've seen them, but and been in person with them. But great team, great energy, doing amazing things for the industry. So I'm so glad that, I could get to be part of this community and be able to share so much with you all because we have such a nice, strong community that we've been building here in mainstream. And as Ian spoke about, we want to talk a little bit about, transforming the culture for engineering, especially for women. And while we're talking about women, just remember that the guys are involved as well. They're always involved. And my main slide, if you do not know her, you need to just, get your movie game on par, get that up there. She is Shuri, she is the princess with Black Panther, but she's also very, very involved in doing a lot of stuff with women in STEM. And she is so brilliant. So I just wanted to have her kind of start us off with just, transforming the engineering culture for women, especially I think I can't really put this to a country because it's definitely global. And as Ian introduced, I'm the CEO and founder of Strategic Reliability Solutions Limited. And guess what? We are actually based in Trinidad and Tobago. And if you do not know where Trinidad and Tobago is, some people don't because on the map it's like this very, very tiny dot. And there are some times that you do not even see the dot. So it may not be there. But just in case you were wondering, Trinidad is actually about 48 times smaller than the UK. So it is a tiny island, but it is gorgeous. It is beautiful. It is right now maybe around 32 degrees Celsius. It will get up to about 37 degrees before the end of the day, or maybe by the end of this session, because the sun comes out and it's brilliant. It's, wonderful and glorious. We have two seasons here, the wet season and the dry season. So always good to have those things involved. But just giving you a little bit of background in terms of where I'm from. Yes, this is one of the beaches, and you have to go up the mountain to get down to the valley to get to the beach for this one. So it's very much an adventure. Trinidad is an amazing place. A little bit about my background. There are so many things on this slide, right? But one of the things I want to just, talk about a little bit is that I have my background in electrical and computer engineering, my master's in engineering asset management. So I do have a bit of an engineering background. And what you see on this slide is a bunch of different like certifications and badges. And the reason I put these up is because each of these have a story behind them. And I'm not going to go into all of the stories into detail, but I will say, just give you a brief overview. So the MLE certification, that is a machinery lubrication engineer certification. It's with ICML, the International Council of Machinery Lubrication. And it is the highest level of certification that they have. And I just before COVID started, before it started to pick up and whatnot, I wrote my first book with CRC Press. That's the one down to the corner, Lubrication Degradation Mechanisms. And I told my publisher, I'm not publishing this book until I have some sort of a certification because I'm a young female in this industry. Nobody's going to believe what I have to say. I need to have some sort of credibility. So I went straight for the MLE certification, got the certification, put it behind my name, and then published the book. So when I did that, I was the first person in the Caribbean, the first female in the Caribbean to get that certification. So there are a lot of like things that I tried to do in terms of breaking the barriers or trying to get people more involved. The VIM and VPR badges as well. When I got those, I was the first female in the world to get that. And with the Mobius Institute's field lubricants analyst, I'm the only female instructor in the world for that course. So I like to try and make sure that we have representation in everything that we do, especially in the lubrication industry. And I think I'm making a slight difference there and opening up some pathways for a lot more women to get involved. But I am the author of a few books. I have most of them down on the bottom of the screen there. And of course, I have the new Empowering Women in STEM book that we recently launched. I am the series editor for that series, and it's all about women and men in STEM just sharing their journeys and making sure that we tell people what's going on. Because a lot of times we have this perception that, things are great and they're grand and they're lovely in the engineering world, and that may not be so for men and women. So, couple things, if you want to just find out more about that, great books to get involved with. I am on the board with as a technical editor for SDLE, and of course, board members with Precision Lubrication and the Reliable magazine. So I do quite a few things. All right, so let's go. We're going to be talking about driving change together. And what I want to talk about today really is three main things. Like when we start talking about driving change, and especially for this industry, we need to talk about how we attract and retain talent. Like that is very important. You can't have people get into the industry without getting them in and keeping them there, right? We need to identify what sort of barriers we're having in the industry. Is it that, we can change those? How can we actually overcome those? And then, of course, we need to know how we get into cultural transformation, because if we don't transform, then we're going to remain stuck where we're at, and we're not going to have that sort of change. And we need to have that sort of change and to have those discussions. And part of that is why we're here today, just to drive that change together and make sure we could actually make some sort of an impact. So I love this one because we talk about attracting and retaining talent. And we think this is like an HR problem, but it just starts off with us trying to understand what we need in the industry and how can we actually keep it in the industry. And I have to go to the stats. We have to make sure we have some sort of data involved first. What are we dealing with? And I looked for some of the stats for the UK. And when we compare what's happened over the past decade, and this is just based on the information that I have or that I had at the point in time when I did this presentation, we compared 2010 to 2021. And what you do see is that the number of women in engineering roles, we've had an increase, right? So we are seeing an increase. It's a 66% increase. That looks wonderful. That's amazing. We have 374,000 more women in engineering roles. That is amazing because it's not just 5 women we had over the past decade, it's 374,000. So that looks good, right? We've made some sort of a progress over the past 10 years. And of course, I have and you will get a copy of these slides afterwards. I do have some links in there where you can actually find some of this data and look at it if you want to. But then I'm like, what does that mean in terms of the other things within the industry? Like, are we just comparing apples to apples? You know, and in this case, when we look at, and these are statistics for the UK, when we look at different, you know, employment roles for females in the overall workforce, we see that we have, I would say, almost a 50% level, and that would be the yellow squiggly line to the top. It's almost 50% for everybody else in the overall workforce, right? So we almost have a little bit of a balance going on in the UK. That's great. That's wonderful. But then we have these other squiggly lines below, and those are the ones that are actually related to engineering. And the core engineering jobs are the one blue, and that's the lowest line. That's the amount of female representation that we have. If we look at the gray line, that is, you know, some sort of related engineering occupations. So it's a little bit higher. And then we have just general related occupations to engineering, which is a little bit higher again. Now, looking at this compared to what we had before, it does look a little bit daunting in that our core engineering roles for women are very low compared to what they are for the rest of the industry. But the plus side is that it's been going up over the past decade, right? We're seeing the increase. The good thing is we're not seeing the numbers going down, they are going up. So that is one of the things that we can actually take away from this slide. But, and this, I sort of broke it down a little bit easier to see here. If we look at it, you know, in an overall perspective, engineering actually accounts for about 24%, and these are females in engineering. So they're about 24%, whereas all industries, in terms of females within the industries, they're around 40%. So 47%. So we can think about engineering getting about a quarter way there. So we are making progress, right? So I think that's one of the things that I just want to make sure people take away from the slide or take away from the data in particular is that we are seeing some sort of an increase. It's not that we're not seeing an increase at all. But then I wanted to compare it to what about the rest of the world? You know, what do they see? You know, is it just, you know, limited to the UK? But when we think about it, it's, and you pull these statistics as well, one of the trends that you see with all of these countries and all of these places is that the number of women in construction is particularly low. Like that's the one sector that I see that has the lowest number. I I really don't want to say consistently, but almost consistently throughout the entire world. And it could just be that we're now getting more women involved in construction. And I see manufacturing taking off because all of these graphs, what they represent is the number of women in these industries. So manufacturing is taking off, transport and warehousing is taking off. We have a lot more women getting involved in that. You know, for some of these places, I didn't have the stats for mining or quarrying. You know, they didn't put Australia in here. I'm sorry, guys. But in the stats, this is what we see. And construction is still pretty low, but we are seeing a little bit of an uptick in women getting into these industries. And then I thought about, is it a labor, a physical labor thing, you know? So what does it look like for researchers? I mean, researchers do have some physical labor involved as well. But if you look at the percentages of female researchers like throughout the world, you actually see that we have a very high number. It's not 8%, it's not 7%, it's not, you know, 11% like we saw before. We see higher numbers, we see 48%, 45%. So we're seeing that women are involved in these scientific fields. It's just that they may be different in different places. So just something to think about. Now, we've had the stats, we've had the data, we know what we're working with, right? How do you actually attract the talent to tell them, come work for me, come into the engineering industry. It's so cool. It's so lovely. It's amazing, right? The first thing you need to do is actually bring more awareness to this industry. And it's something that we struggle with quite a bit, I would say, because a lot of times we don't know what to expect. Like there's people within the aviation industry or, the engineering aviation industry. Nobody knows what their day looks like. So how can we ask people to come and join us into that particular industry? What about the people who work out on those chemical plants or, any of these other engineering or in a mining field, what does their day look like? So how can we expect to actually bring more people in if people don't know what they're going to get themselves involved in? So it's very important, like when we're starting to try to attract new talent into this industry, we have to bring awareness to the industry. Share a little bit about this is what you're expected to do on a regular basis, but don't make it boring. Have, interesting things, what they would see, what, they can get, actually provide an accurate job description because there are some people, and HR people are not gonna like me very much for this one, but they say, you work in a high-paced, very fast-paced, exciting environment. And then you come to the office and then it's very bland and boring, right? So, please provide accurate job descriptions for people. Don't use biased words in your job description because what we've seen is that that could actually throw off certain candidates. And what I mean by biased words is that you may see a job description that says, he should be able to lift 150 pounds. Now, on a regular day, people may just, gloss that over and say, that's fine, that's okay, that's how we've always put that job description. But it could mean that somebody who doesn't identify as being a he or somebody who may not be able to lift 150 pounds, you've just thrown them out of the window. They can't, they're like, okay, well, I can't do that job. If you were to rephrase that and say the candidate must be able to move 150 pounds with or without assistance, you've just opened your pool. You've just opened your range of people who could apply for that job. So simple bias words is something that you may look at. You want to make sure that when you're putting your ads out there to try to get and attract your talent to your industry, that you actually have things that make sense to other people, things that they would identify with, and things that they may not feel biased about. Another thing that I've seen happen time and time again is that when we have these interviews, we actually have a non-diverse hiring panel. So you get to the engineering interviews, and the persons doing the interviews would just be engineers. Everybody's on a technical level, and that sort of biases a little bit in terms of the results, the questions, what they're looking for. They know exactly what they want, but are we really getting the real talent that we need? Because in engineering, you need to be able to attract different types of talents, and people do things differently. That's why we have diverse teams. And if you have uh like the hiring panel or the interviewing panel, if you have some technical and non-technical team members, they could be able to spot different things, and they would be able to ask different questions of the candidate, like things that may resonate more with them, or things that they would be able to pick up on to figure out that the candidate is actually more suited for that industry or for that role, or that the person will be able to handle the pressures of that job rather than just being technically competent. You want to have a little more of a holistic candidate when you have these things involved. So make sure we are able to actually attract the right talents. And if you attract the right talents, how do you actually, retain that talent? And one of the things that we see time and time again is that a lot of times we have these internship programs and you have the new recruits coming in and they're excited and they want to see and do every single little thing, but nobody checks back in with them to find out how they're doing. Is it that it's a tough work environment for them? Is it not what they expected to have? You know, is it that they're having these bad experiences and nobody's talking about it because they don't want to risk losing their internship um, over reporting something that's been bad? So one of the things we often forget is to check in with your new recruits because and try to get some honest answers from them, just to make sure that you understand what's going on in the industry, you understand what's going on in your workplace, and that you can retain that talent because if they're having these bad experiences, I don't think they'll want to stay. And then you start having a higher churn out rates and people start leaving a lot more. Another thing that we see in terms of women coming into the industry, I'm trying not to sound biased here. A lot of them don't get promoted. And one of the reasons for that is that they don't have like a roadmap. Like they don't get into the industry and say, this is your roadmap. This is how we're gonna, make sure that you get to level one, level two, level three, so on into management or wherever you want to go. Like this is what we designed for you. This is your career pathway. This is your, pathway for all of your developments and all of your growths. But if we don't outline that to them, then they start feeling frustrated. And it's one thing to outline it to them, but you have to make sure that when they meet those, you know, levels or they pass the goals or the KPIs, that you actually do what you say you're going to do. Because there's some instances where a lot of companies may not do that. They may have a roadmap, it's nice and it's pretty and it's put away in a drawer somewhere, but they don't follow it. So we have to make sure that they follow it. Another thing that we see a lot of is inclusion. And this may sound weird to some people because they think, well, we already have everybody in here. We have already retained the woman. What else are we doing, that may not include them? And sometimes we have these instances where people could have, people say, okay, let's go out for drinks after work. But we're thinking everybody should be able to do that, but not everybody can participate. Some people have, they have their kids, they have after school activities. Some people may not, you know, for religious or, medical reasons, they may not be able to have alcoholic beverages. Some, certain things may prevent them from being able to actually get into those activities with other people. So we're actually excluding them by telling them this is the only time that we have to, come together as a team. So if you want, and that may make them feel a little bit isolated. So if you want to include them, try to get activities where everybody could participate, make sure that we are actually taking that into consideration. Or you could do like a poll, you know, ask everybody what they want to do because not all of the times, sometimes the best relationships and the best forms of camaraderie are not entirely formed in the office. They're formed outside of the office. So, make sure that you're able to include everybody when you're, trying to retain your talent because you don't want people to feel that they're isolated. You don't want them to feel that, they don't belong or any of that. We also see this is a very difficult one. being able to accommodate for different types of schedules when you're trying to retain talent. So people may come into the industry, especially for women, and men as well, uh, being able to have that flexible working hours, that is very important. We talk a lot about work-life balance, but there's the term that's being used now is work-life integration, which I think is a little bit better than balance, because balance means you have one up or one down, or always going against each other. But integration sounds a little bit better, and being able to have these flexible working hours that can give somebody a little more time to be more productive. So, for instance, if I leave home at, oh gosh, I don't really want to say that 5 a.m. in the morning because I really don't want to do that. That may be the only time that I can leave to get to my destination without any traffic, but then I would be upset for the rest of the day. I'll be really tired by the time it's 8 o'clock, by the time the real work starts. And I just have to leave at that time because if I don't, then I'll be stuck in traffic for 2 hours. So having those flexible working hours allows for people to be a little more, I would say, productive in terms of their day. So if you're trying to retain your talent, make sure you have some sort of flexible working hours arrangement because not all the times everybody could be at an 8 to 4 or a 9 to 5 and, give their best during those hours. There are some people who work better in the night compared to in the day. So different things work for different people. And of course, we can't talk about this enough. Having those mentorship programs to provide guidance, so especially to women getting in the industry, because a lot of times they don't know, and this goes for the guys as well. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know that if you work on particular projects associated with certain things, that you get a little more credits towards your earning your engineering degree or earning your engineering certification. They may not be aware that there are certain industry events happening that they are not a part of. So having those mentorship programs, they're very important. It helps so much in terms of getting more people involved, letting them feel that they're part of the industry, making sure that you retain that talent because after they've spent 3 to 4 to 5 years earning their engineering degree, you want to make sure that they actually put it to good use. So when we get them involved into industry, we need to make sure that we keep them there. So I just wanted to do a little bit of a wrap up in terms of how you actually retain that talent in the industry. And I think it's very important that after we attract the talent, we keep it. Because if we have them being lost afterwards, then we have a little bit of a problem. So I'm going to pause a little bit to see if we have any questions, because I know we have a small group. So you guys will have to help me out here if we have any questions. If not, we can go ahead and identifying some barriers because, why not? So I'm going to jump into some of the barriers that we see. Now, we'll talk a little bit about unconscious bias, and it's something that you may see coming up throughout these slides and throughout this entire presentation. It's because it's something that we're not entirely aware of. And I will be giving you some examples throughout, of course, to kind of just, realize how much of a role unconscious bias plays in what we do on a daily basis. Now, there are also some kind of barriers that we see a lot of times, and it's unconscious bias, it's the lack of role models, and that work-life imbalance. Now, I found this book, and this was very, very interesting. I think it's by Mackenzie Kingling. And they actually mentioned in the book that for every 100 women, every 100 men that are being promoted, only 81 women are afforded the opportunity. And I found I was very interested in the way that they worded that because they didn't say that 81 women were promoted. They said that they were afforded the opportunity. And there's a big difference in terms of that, in terms of the way that's worded, because first of all, what it means is that they didn't get promoted. They were just in the general pool of people that should have been promoted, but they didn't. And they went deeper into the stats to actually say that the values go down when you start talking about Latina women or you start talking about colored women as well. It goes down to 60, 61, and 51% for every 100 men that are being promoted. And there are some unconscious biases involved in terms of hiring, in terms of like performance reviews. Some people, when they're doing their performance reviews, they're like, okay, well, I can't promote this woman because she actually has a family and I don't want her to have to spend so much time in that environment that she cannot take care of her family. And it is a little bit of a bias that people have when they're doing these performance reviews. Another bias that they may have is that they think that we don't want to promote this female because we think it's a toxic environment that she'll be promoted into. We want to protect her. And this is some of the parts that people don't see in terms of the gears turning. Let's protect her so she doesn't have to go into that environment. And protecting her from the managerial standpoint may not mean that for her. In her mind, she may be like, why is she not being promoted? She's done the work, clearly she fits into that, but she may not see the biases that may be to the background. And sometimes that actually impacts a lot of women in terms of their career progression, and it definitely hinders their compensation as well. So a lot of times you see some of those things happening, and it is a little bit of an unconscious bias, but I want to make sure that you all um are able to recognize it, when you start doing these things, think about your process in terms of what you're going to go through. I mean, this book was really interesting when I saw it, and they have a lot of different stats in it. So it's really something that you really want to look into. And again, another systemic barrier. There was this um there was this class that was going on, was in um I think they were like 11-year-olds or something. And they asked everybody to draw what an engineer looked like. And most of the people in the class, they drew, these guys out in the field and whatnot. And there was this one male student who did this drawing, and it was of this female wearing her heels, wearing her pearls, with and they asked them to put their tools of their trade. And her tools was an iPhone, a computer, a robot. I feel like that may be another computer on the side, but I'm not too sure. But the reason that this student was able to draw that is because he went to a robotics camp earlier in the summer, and it was a female engineer leading the robotics camp. So if you have role models that they can see, that they can, identify with, that helps a lot within this industry, because a lot of times, and like I get it when I ask ChatGPT, create a picture of an engineer doing X, Y, and Z. Sometimes the first pictures that I get are male, they're not female, right? So we have a little bit of a lack of role models, and that's what, we need to have more women involved in these roles, because seeing other women in these roles can inspire more women to join the industry, can inspire more women to, get involved and say, well, if I can see another female engineer being involved doing that type of work, then maybe I can do it as well. And I know this one is a little bit sometimes it's true. Sometimes, we get a little bit of shift in terms of the objects on the screen onto the right hand side. But there is a little bit of a work-life imbalance that we see in that you tell women that you can do all of these things, but yet still you have all of the duties and all of the responsibilities on them as well. Whereas sometimes with the guys, and this is not entirely true because like I've seen some of the roles being reversed a little bit, especially as we get into this, we evolve a little bit more, which is great, and I love that. Um, Sometimes we have this work-life imbalance where we have these policies that are in place that we can't change, and we're like, we're not able to support women or men to say, okay, well, I have to drop my kids to school in the morning. I will be in work at 9 a.m. I wouldn't be there at 8 a.m. because I can't drop the kids off any earlier than I can. And it takes me X amount to commute or whatever. So sometimes people are women or sometimes guys as well. They're actually forced to choose between their career and their family life. So being able to identify those barriers, it kind of helps when you're trying to get more women involved and to get more people involved in engineering, know that they actually have lives outside of the workplace. And you need to be able to accommodate for that. People have different things going on at different times. And we are all human at the end of the day. So there are a lot of things that happen on a daily basis that, kind of try to get us involved in a lot more things. Now, if only I could do that snap and make sure that, everything transformed, we are good to go with, moving forward, that would be amazing. But I can't do that snap. I am not Thanos. I do not have that golden glove. But let's talk about being able to have some sort of a cultural transformation, right? To design more women into the system. And one of the things that we see is that we need to have more inclusive leadership. We need to be able to have some sort of empowerment and voice and flexible work models. And this is how we get more women involved because we need to have them, at the forefront, being able to move and being able to have these safe environments. And when we start talking about inclusive leadership, it's more of, you know, having different thoughts in the room when you're having these sort of discussions. It's not just you have a team of everybody, a team of, full engineers, everybody at a particular age group, and they're making the decisions because if you are, then they've all been exposed to the same thing. They've all been exposed to the same process, the same thoughts, the same ways of thinking. So their strategy and their way forward it's going to be aligned, and that's nice and that's great, but it's not going to have any sort of diversity. So you're going to be stuck at the same level for all time. If you start bringing in more people and you start bringing in diverse teams, then you start seeing changes in your team. You start seeing people starting to think a little bit differently. You start seeing them change their thought process and change the way that they do things. And that could lead to more efficiency. It could lead to so many more solutions being, being actually, delivered to your customer, to your workplace, figuring out ways of doing different things. And it makes people feel more included. And if you have a more included team and people involved, people actually work better because they want to work. And I think that's very, very important. I absolutely love this one because we start talking about empowerment and being able to find a voice. And, you know, Lucy does an amazing job in terms of who she is. And of course, you have Charlie Brown, trying to say, who is to say who is good and who is bad? Of course, Lucy is the one to say it, but not saying that she should be able to judge people, but just being able to find your voice and to create that different channels for feedback. Because a lot of times you're in the room and you have, and I see this so many times, you're in the room, it's a bunch of engineers, you have one or two females involved, the meeting is happening, and the meeting goes on till the end and you don't hear from the females. You don't hear their opinions or what they think about or if they had any sort of feedback because they don't feel comfortable sharing in that environment. They think that they may not, their thoughts may not be agreed with. They think that their thoughts are not valid enough. So a lot of times, just being able to create that channel for feedback. And if you are within the room, you ask them, say, what were you thinking about? I saw you writing down this on a piece of paper, you know, give them their voice so that they are more comfortable sharing that information. Because unless they are, then we're going to have a problem in terms of everything is going to be segregated. Everything is going to be, of one voice. We need to be able to have that diversity. We need to make sure that their contributions feel valued and heard because then they don't feel included. And then you're not including them in the conversation and they don't feel that they are part of the organization or that they are part of making the decisions going forward. So you're not providing any sort of opportunity for them to grow. And just by giving them their voice and, empowering them to, talk a little bit more, let's hear what you're thinking about, that can actually change their whole career and give them more opportunities than you can even imagine. So give them their voice, help them with their empowerment. I really do like this one because Dilbert actually says that there is, he found the secret to the work life the work life balance, which is to have no life. So you have to do no work, you know. That may not work for a lot of people, but just, thinking about it, we want to be able to support work-life integration because what we see happening quite a lot is that people get very burnt out because they are constantly pushing, constantly going. And what happens then is that they feel burnt out, they feel stressed out, and they leave the organization. So you actually end up losing the talent that you've been, nurturing, that you've been putting all of your resources into in terms of training and all of that. You lose all of that because you can't have that work-life integration because that person isn't getting the time that they need to take the downtime to do what they need to do, and you're not supporting a flexible environment. So having that flexible environment is very important, like especially for women in the industry as well as guys. Like this is not limited to women only, but having that flexible work-life integration actually allows women to thrive a little bit more because we know a lot of women and guys, they are very much multitaskers and they want to be able to do as many things that they can at the same point in time. But we need to be able to support that. We need to be able to get that work-life integration for them because if we don't, then we risk losing them in the industry. And we don't want to lose them after we've, invested so much into them having and being in industry. So I know we have a couple of things in the chat going on. I,
We
I
have,
haven't been
Sonia.
able to check it.
No, we
So I'm
have,
gonna,
Sonia. We have. We have. I'll tell you what the question is. It's from
yes.
Steph. She's talking about when you mentioned about the picture of the idea of a. Oh, sorry, I'll read it out because I'm not making a
Yeah.
very good of it. About the students who were asked to draw their idea of an engineer, and you drew the woman
Mhm.
with the pearls and stuff. Do you know of any examples of programs in schools or universities that are driving real change to encourage more female representation? Is it any representation in STEM engineering? Is there any folks that spring to mind where you think they are doing great stuff?
I have so many people that come to mind immediately. I always have people reach out to me and ask me, we're doing a session with women in STEM. Can you come in and do a talk? I
Mm.
did a talk, this is just before I went to Australia for the mainstream conference, with a girls' camp based in Michigan. And um, the thing about it is that during the ages of like 5 to 11, that's when we start seeing people having the change in that at that age, they're so curious and they just want to do whatever they want to do. If they're drawn towards math or science or anything like that, they're curious about it, they go down that road. But after they start getting older, that's when they are told that subjects actually have a gender. Like this, you can't do this subject because it's for boys, or you can't do this subject because it's not, girls aren't supposed to do that. And that's when they start shying away and they start pulling back from those industries. And that's where we're seeing most of the change happen. So there are quite a few people who are doing stuff with women in STEM in universities, in I would say camps, summer camps. And I can put together a list for you um, after, just, send me your contact details, especially in the US. And there are a couple in the UK as well. Last week I was dealing with a guy, he is based in Scotland. He is an educator for children, I believe, under 12, and he does stuff with STEM for them. And what he does is, in addition to doing the experiments and all of those things, he also interviews women within different industries and sort of brings that to his kids in the classroom. So, we have this female in computer engineering, or, this woman doing amazing things in the medical industry. So there are a lot of programs that are doing that in the UK, in the US. I have to check for Australia. Um, but definitely we try to make it globally. So there are programs involved. I will send you some stuff. Oh wait, I
Sorry,
think you. Yeah.
there was a comment from Carl who loved the phrase that you used, work-life integration. Like,
Integration, yes.
and then Rachel mentioned never had a problem voicing her opinion, but was often described as being emotional. I wonder now
Yeah.
whether it was just because women express themselves differently. Not sure how a man
Mhm.
saying same thing would have been described.
Yes.
I think
Hmm.
you were probably in the wrong organization, Rachel. They sound like idiots to me.
No, it's something that I see as well. Um, and this is not just that I would say or Rachel would say, because like talking to some of the authors of the Woman in STEM books, it's something that they've come across as well. When they voice their opinion or they're very passionate about what they're doing, they usually agree with, don't get so emotional. Um, and they're like, I'm just talking the facts. Like, that's it. Sometimes, and again, this goes back to like unconscious bias that we may have within the industry. And you may think that somebody's getting emotional, but they're just very passionate about their stuff. We express things differently. And I like how you said that, Rachel. Very nicely said. Um, but it is unconscious bias, and we need to be able to approach these things a little bit differently. Listen to what people have to say, give them the grace that they need, and hear what they have to say. Because if we don't listen to what they have to say, we are silencing them. And by silencing them, we are telling them that they are not included, and that's going to push them away from the industry. And we don't want to do that. Did we have any? I know I saw like a couple of things come in, so I just want to make sure that we address them as we go along so we don't like forget.
I think that was it, Sonia.
That was about it. Okay, so
Yeah.
we get to find some key learnings and chart our path forward. Um, because a lot of times we're just trying to get more women involved. And it's it's very interesting because we say we want to get more women involved, but the thing about it is, and people don't talk about this enough, is that engineering is a little bit of a toxic environment. And it's not just toxic for women, it's also for men. And this is going to sound very strange, but one of my authors for the Woman in STEM book, she actually did her PhD on about the authenticity of women in engineering. And what she did is that she interviewed a bunch of people. She interviewed guys and she interviewed women as well. And when she interviewed the guys, what she realized is that they felt inauthentic. And because they felt like they had to match up to a particular standard within engineering, they were a little bit more, they weren't as approachable to women within the industry. So because they felt inauthentic, they actually helped to create a bit of a toxic environment for the women coming in, not because they wanted it to be toxic, but because they didn't want the woman to feel that way when they came in. And it's something that I never thought about until she brought it up. And she's like, yeah, she's doing the research and this is what she's finding. It's a different shift that she is seeing in the industry. And it's something that we don't talk about. So even though I'm talking about getting more women involved in engineering, we need to make sure that we're there for our guys as well, because sometimes they experience a lot of things that they may not talk about. So some of the things that I am talking about here can be used for keeping the guys in the engineering industry as well. Definitely building strong networks. It's very important. Being able to invest in skill development and championing advocacy, because if we don't do that, then what are we doing? And building strong networks, I mean, that starts with what we're doing here in this mainstream community, because I think that mainstream does that really, really well, is that they have a very strong network and they've built a community for men and women within this industry. And being able to find that community, being able to find, people call it, you find your tribe, that helps a lot because it allows for the exchange of information between different industries, different organizations, even within your own industry or within your own company, you may not be aware of certain things that you can do to support. And having that strong network just allows you more access to resources. Like it allows you to, find out ways that you can provide different levels of sponsorship to somebody else. And sponsorship may not just mean you're providing some sort of financial return or financial benefits. It could just mean writing a letter of recommendation to somebody, or helping them to move up the ladder, in some way or another, and just being able to support them on a regular basis. So having those strong networks, very, very important. um of course, invest in your skill development, because being able to have those, training programs, those development programs, people need that. And what we're seeing is that we're having a little bit of a skills shortage or a skills gap, especially as AI is literally taking over. We have a shortage of skills. Like there are certain skills, nobody nobody went to school to become a prompt engineer yet, right? None of us would have had some of the jobs that are going to be created in the next, I want to say 5 or 10 years, but I think it's going to be within the next year. They've never existed before. So being able to invest in those skills, being able to invest in your people to get those skills, that is very important. And what we've seen as well is that sometimes women or men may not know what skill gaps they have, or what skill gaps they need to close in order to get to the next level. So helping them to invest in that is very, very important. Of course, you have to champion some sort of advocacy. You know, if you see certain things within your organization, try to get more women involved. Always try to get more women involved, try to get more, diversity involved, get people going within the industry, because if you don't champion them, then who's going to do that? You know, you have to have different champions throughout your industry, throughout your organization, because that is what will drive it forward. Of course, you have some cultural and societal barriers. And, I absolutely love this one because you should never tell somebody that they can't do something, because if that's your dream, you have to protect it. You know, what you want to do is you want to help them forward. You want to push them forward. You want to be that advocate for them. You want to be that supporter. You want to be that champion for them, because if they can do it, then they're actually helping making an impact. And whether you realize it or not, you are making that impact for them as well. You are helping them to make that impact. So, that part is very, very important. And, if we start addressing the different cultural and societal barriers, educate, educate people about bias, because sometimes they just don't know, similar to what I spoke about earlier in terms of just having that wording properly done on your job description. That is very important. Um, Promote allyship, very important. You need to have everybody involved, and challenge those stereotypes that you have going on, going forward. Now, when you start talking about education on bias, like there are so many things and that you can help your employees with. There is training out there that can, help people. And even like a quick Google search or a chat GPT search could tell you about some of the different biases that actually exist in terms of training for your employees, especially for your managers and your leaders, because you want to make sure that they are not biased when they make their decisions, or that they don't have some unconscious bias. So, you could probably put it in the chat, right? If we, if I'm saying an engineer walks into the room, what are you immediately thinking about? Are you thinking about a guy? Are you thinking about a female? Are you thinking about somebody that's old? Are you thinking somebody that's young? Are you thinking somebody in coveralls? Or are you thinking about somebody in a shirt and pants? You know, what was your immediate thought when I said an engineer walked into the room? What type of room was it? Was it a crowded room? Was it a boardroom? Was it a control room for the plant? We all have these little biases that we may not realize. So just being able to think and to acknowledge that you have those biases and then check yourself before you do anything else is very important. So educating on bias, can't comment enough on that. Make sure you start thinking about us a little bit more. So I'm seeing things come in the chat. I'm gonna ask Ian to help me out a little bit. Um, in terms of what came in, what responses we had.
Yeah, there's a question. Rachel, do you want to unmute yourself and just ask the
Yeah,
question?
sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I kind of I work on a women's leadership program, and one of the
Yeah.
things that's come across is that women really have a massive misperception about what networking's about. And they see it, I think, because they've seen a lot of negative examples, kind of down the golf club, boys club
Yes.
stuff. And they see it as being selfish. They see it as being grabby. It's all about climbing the greasy pole. And then when you start to talk to them about how it can be reciprocal activity, and it's how we help one another and how we lift others up, it's like, oh, I've completely changed my mind about what networking is about. But there's not, I mean, that's great if someone's on a leadership program and you can get them to think about that, but for the most part, people aren't. And therefore, how we break down that misperception about what networking's about and get people to think of it not as a dirty thing where everyone has a view about it, and it has to happen in a big room, and it's all about coffees, people not knowing anyone and who do I talk to. Networking doesn't have to be that at all.
No. And it starts with the mainstream community meetup that they're having in the UK in September. I'm just going to put that plug in there because they do a definitely great job in terms of bringing people together and showing them that networking is not that, dirty thing that people may think about, because networking could simply be what we do on LinkedIn. you know, we interact with each other, we help each other, we support each other, we lift each other up. And we go back to educating on bias, you know, we think that it's a bad thing, but it really is just building your community. So maybe we change the word networking to building your community, which is what they definitely do at the mainstream in these events that they're having leading up to the big events. So I'm so glad that you unmuted yourself so that we could hear that full question, Rachel. Thank you so much for that.
We've got another question as well. Do you want to answer me? Do you want to mention it?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Thank you for that, Sonia. I had this question come up because one of my best mates, he's actually an engineer for a major global engineering company, and we have this discussion quite a lot. And he has quite strong opinions about it, but all in defense of women in the workplace, because he does work with a lot of women in his team.
Right.
But the thing that came up is, do you think that the other side can be true as well, that we as women sometimes, because we are so used to this narrative, that we suffer from a sense of imposter syndrome, and then we
Yes,
create
yes,
this reality for ourselves, even though
yes.
it might not be true
Might
in
not exist.
all
Yeah.
situations? And how
Yes,
do
definitely.
you get out of that space, and how do you rise above that, essentially?
I think the first thing is identifying it. Identifying it and knowing that you have that happen, because you cannot change the biases that people come in with into your organization. Um, what you can do is be able to identify it and say, you know, this is a safe space. You don't have to feel like that here. We are in the, you know, we want to hear your voice. We want to make sure that you are heard. We want to make sure that you get represented. And there are no strings attached. It's not that you have to do this in order to feel represented. Everybody's on the same playing field there. And I think one of the things, especially that I see that, you know, come across within, like when I go into the room in these engineering discussions, you know, it may be 14 guys on around the table, and I'm the only female present. And it's like, you know, you get in there and you have this unconscious bias again, and it usually starts up with some of the guys asking some questions, then and they're like trying to figure out, are you competent enough to have this conversation with me?
Mm,
And it's something that I get like quite often. And initially in my journey, I would just like, they ask me a question, I answer it, we move on, we keep going. But what I've realized within the industry, that's not necessarily best way forward. So when I get into those situations now and they ask the question, I come back with another question that helps them to figure out the answer. So it's a little bit of a
right.
coaching routine. And what that does is that it sort of breaks down a lot of barriers very quickly, because they realize she knows what she's talking about. She trusts me to figure this information out. And she's led me to a solution that I came up with her help. So you broke down a lot of barriers very quickly that you would not have been able to do on a regular basis. If you just, you know, they ask a question, you respond, and you have that back and forth. But it's about having the conversation with the person and helping
Mm,
them to realize we're all on the same team here. We're all looking for the same solution. So help me to help you to figure that out. And I think
right, perfect.
that sort of dynamic helps when you're in these situations. And some women, you know, they may feel like they're being attacked when all of these questions are coming at them. And so they put up these barriers and they're like, okay, well, that's a hostile environment. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to get out of the industry. But I understand what your friend is saying in terms of, you know, women having those biases as well, because the biases go both ways. They definitely go both ways. And the only way to sort of break that down is to let people know that we're on a level playing field. And
And
that's something.
that boosts your confidence as well
It does.
when you approach it in that way.
It does.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It does
Thanks
so
for that.
much. That's a life hack. Did we have any more questions? Because I want to make sure we address them as they come in.
Question I have is, do you know, I think one of the challenges or the barriers is at school level, you know, when children are looking to either get involved with engineering
Yep.
or not. And at that point, I do feel that they have a real lack of understanding of what industry looks like, particularly engineering.
Yes. Yes. I agree with you completely, Andrew, because when I was growing up, people asked me what is an engineer? Is that the person who drives the train? Right? Because that's what they saw on TV. And at that point in time, I'm not saying that I'm that old, but we didn't really have the internet, yet. But these days we have access to a lot more information, and people getting involved, and having these discussions and people being able to put their information out there helps to create a greater awareness. And like that's one of the things that I'm working with a lot of different groups. They are, I would say, summer camps or camps for after school for kids at the younger ages, because they need to be able to see role models, or they need to be able to see people that they can identify with, or ask them questions like, what do you do on a daily basis? How does your job impact the world? Or what do you do to help create change in the industry? And helping them to realize that there is a purpose behind what we do, and we're not just playing with things on a daily basis, even though that may sound very cool to them. You need to be able to help them to understand what the industry is like, or what they can expect, because the children of today are very different from the children of 10 years ago in terms of the way that they think and the way that they analyze certain situations. Like a lot of them are, getting into the business industry very quickly because they're seeing people doing that. That's what they see online. That's what they see their parents or their peers or their neighbors doing. So they are just like jumping into that because they've been conditioned already from that standpoint in terms of what they want to do. So it starts at a very young age, because after they get to 11, 12 years old, that's when all of the biases start coming in, and they start saying, don't do engineering, it's a boys subject. Or, don't get into that, your hands are going to get dirty. You don't want your hands to get dirty because you need to have like proper nails done or something like that, So that's when the biases start coming in. So prepping them from a very early age, showing them that there is no gender associated with jobs. It's just really getting a solution to something that you need to get done, and helping them to figure out what they want to do, or, navigates for them in those different directions. That's the best that we can do right now. And that's what we're trying to do in terms of increasing the awareness and getting more people involved. So I hope that helped to answer your question in some roundabout way. I think I saw some stuff coming in the chat. I saw my screen blink a little bit.
Yeah. Carl, do you want to? I don't know if you're able to speak, but it's more comments than questions, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah, I know. I'll just put a couple of comments in. So, firstly, Tanya, thanks. You've touched on so many really tangible points. Unfortunately, it's points that are being raised again and again, and far too often, in my opinion. So the thing that I've just put in the chat was just around that continuity. What I tend to see is these topics come up in an ad hoc manner. The cadence of how they're being raised, we address them, and then they sort of get forgotten about and then re-brought up.
Yeah.
So it's important to make sure that there is this continuity from grassroots at an educational level all the way through to an employed workforce. So there's a thorough understanding that it is something that needs to be spoken about more. It's something that's going to be incorporated more. I like some of the imagery stuff that you've put in the presentation so far. Just
Keep it good.
FYI, I'm a proud ex-military man, so nobody in my house is allowed to touch the ironing board other than me, because it has to be done that way.
I know.
But no, some really good points. The big thing that I would mention is in the mentorship side of things. I've often found, yes, it's great to have role models, female role models for female engineers, but it's equally as important to have male role models as well. The reason
Good that you
being is
brought that
because I've
up.
had really good success with comparative ownership, as I call it. You know, if I'm a male and I can advocate for the female workforce, there is no excuse why other men in my workforce cannot. And that's a really big point then, because it's sometimes in these areas of education, certain people will feel like they're being told rather than educated. But if there's people in their team that are doing it and they are very, very aware and very educated themselves, it creates this comparison that you cannot exit from. So I think it's just a really good point that I've seen work in the military, and I've seen it in civilian industries as well.
Nice. That, like, it's really just at the end of the day, it's really making sure that we all work together. And I think that's the thing. It's so simple, but it's so complex at the same time. So, it's just really breaking down those barriers and saying, okay, you know what? We're here to solve this problem. Let's just get it done.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
we need everybody on board, because everybody has a different skill sets. Everybody has a different way that they think, that they would bring problems or solutions to life. And that's what we need to move forward. We can't all have the same solution and say, okay, well, yeah, we have a unanimous vote here. Everybody's going to do that. Having that diversity, having, diversity of thought, that's where it actually brings it together, because that's how you create unique solutions. That's how you create the solutions that change the world.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
it's really about working together for that one.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The biggest thing for me is always, regardless of the team dynamics, the outcome is the focus. So the biggest thing for any team is they all want the same outcome. I've often said, having different team members is great. And for me, women are born with the superpower of emotional quotient far above a lot of men in my workforce. So yeah, always having a different lens or a different voice at the table is great. There is no downside to it.
No, definitely not. And that's how we make the change, actually. That is how we make the change. Do we have any other questions? I just want to make sure we address everybody before, because I know we close off in the next 15 minutes or so.
Don't think so.
Don't think so? All right. And Carl just did a brilliant job of explaining the slide for me in terms of promoting allyship, because, and honestly, it's really allyship goes hand in hand, male or female, because I advocate for a lot of guys, and then I have a lot of guys advocate for me. It goes both ways. It's not just a one-way street. And that's why, it has to be us working together, right? Again, challenging the stereotypes. We need to have internal communications, exactly like we talked about just now. External branding and leadership messaging in terms of, moving forward. We are all in this together. This is our collective action plan. Always set some clear metrics. This is not an HR issue. It's not just HR that's involved. Your team leaders in operations, in engineering, in all of the different departments, everybody is involved in this, right? You have to set some clear metrics. You need to be, even if you have clear metrics, you need to be able to review that regularly. And of course, always continue having that dialogue, because if you don't have that, then what is it? And we always bring this guy back in, Peter Drucker, because if you cannot measure it, you can't manage it. So, and something that I see happen within industry as well is that we have these check boxes, like, okay, we need to hire 5 women in engineering, done, the end, put that aside. We've accomplished that checkbox, that's it. But it goes beyond that checkbox, have the goals, we're hiring women in the industry, we're hiring women in engineering. Are we promoting them? Are we making sure that they can share their ideas and be able to lead teams going forward? Being able to set that clear metric is very important. But again, you need to be able to review that regularly, because you can set a metric, you can set a KPI, and then you don't hear about it. Just like Carl mentioned, you don't hear about it for the rest of the year until the end of the year when your KPI session is coming up and you're like, oh, wait, what did we do for this one? So always make sure that you review, you assess, you make sure that it actually is working, because sometimes it may not be. And you need to be able to change it at that point and say, what can we do to make it work? And develop your strategies as you move forward. So always do that regular review. Of course, continuous dialogue is very, very important. Once you stop hearing stuff from the next side, that's when you have an issue. And that's when you're like, something is wrong here. We need to make sure that we figure out what's going on. But, having that continuous dialogue, very, very important. You need to make sure that we always have that. So just trying to wrap it up and summarize it at the end. How do we transform this culture? The main thing is together. That's the only way we could do it, is if we work together, get your talents, bring them in and keep them there, have those clear, very clear roadmaps, actively listen to your feedback, and of course, review as much as you can, because you want to make sure that you are actually making progress, and that if you aren't making progress, you can make those changes to have that progress, going forward. So that was the end of my slide pack there. I just wanted to make sure that we had a little bit of time for questions at the end, because I think we have about 10 minutes remaining. So I'm going to open it up.
I do have one question, Sanya.
Nice.
You mentioned a lot about in the talent acquisition space.
Yes.
I've heard it many times. I don't have any sort of metrics in front of me, but often women will shy away from an application for a role if they don't meet every one of the criteria.
Yes.
Whereas a man will look at it and think, I meet probably half, so I'll throw my hat in the ring. What's your feeling with regards to that? Because I know, and Sumi mentioned things like imposter syndrome, and that can happen once you're in a role. But equally, in your opinion, do women second guess just in the application phase, and what can be done in that space to just really, encourage them to say, if you started with a no, you've got to chuck your hat in the ring for these roles.
Yeah.
And as you said, sometimes it's on the employer side because they don't often do a great job of articulating the role too well. But just encouraging people to say, that in a perfect world is what we're looking for, but we don't live in a perfect world. We know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it starts with that job ad that they put forward. And what I think I start seeing people put in there is that to the bottom, they say, we are an equal employer. We employ both, we do not have that bias in terms of who we're going to employ. If you do not meet all of these requirements, but feel that you can, please still apply. So they actually put that in writing. And I think that kind of helps a little bit, because you cannot change the way that women think when they see these job applications. But having that little line at the bottom, that can help encourage them to say, okay, well, I don't meet every single thing, but I can probably try, And I think the wording on these job ads as well needs to change a little bit, because when you think about it, half of the skills that they're asking for can be taught, like they can, train somebody to do that. So at the end of the day, what you're really looking for is somebody who is flexible, who can adapt easily to situations, and who's willing to learn. Everything else could be taught at the end of the day. So I think it's how you actually put that forward. And, the screening process, we're using AI quite a bit. So if they are using AI to screen some of these applications coming in, a lot of them will get rejected. So that's another part of it that we haven't talked about yet. The screening process, like you have 1,000 applications coming for this job. Do you have a human going through this to say, okay, well, this looks interesting. I think this person could be a good fit. Or, do you just have an AI model running through for keywords that are highlighted at the end of the day? So you end up missing a lot of people. You end up like taking a lot of people out because you don't have this stuff in place at the end of the day. So that's another thing that we haven't touched on yet, but definitely something that we need to talk about a little bit more in terms of hiring people and getting them in the industry. Yeah, it's something that I see happening quite a lot. And then with the models that we're using, sometimes they may have biases involved in terms of names. So they may look for particular names or names that are not, or names that should be within that industry. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but
Yeah, I did drop a message in the chat earlier. So unfortunately,
okay.
I've never been in the fortunate position to have 1,000 applicants for any one of my roles. But no, when I was in my last role in exec, one of the first requests from the people and culture team was, before any CV hits the review panel, is that all names are removed, all geographics
Right.
of any education are removed, and we're
Mm-hmm.
primarily just focusing on the content of the person's CV.
Yep.
And yeah, I can tell you that the results, when it came through, it was just based purely on how people are writing their CVs, and
Yeah.
the actual results for male to female were actually probably more in favor of a female workforce, because they were just
Right.
better at writing CVs, and they kind of
Mm-hmm.
articulated things a lot better than the male applicants.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
I've
top
seen
tip:
that.
don't hire people exactly like yourself.
No, you already exist. You need people to help
Yeah,
balance you up.
I think Ian would say they don't need two of me.
There were 100 of you. There were 100 of you, Carl. I would definitely say that, of course.
Oh my gosh. Did we have any more questions? Because I know we have like 5 minutes remaining.
Any more questions? No?
No.
Well, I thought that was
Wow.
brilliant. I really enjoyed that, Sanya. And it was, for being a small group, there was a lot of discussion and it was very interactive.
yeah.
So
Nice.
it's a message. It's a message that we need to spread far and wide. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the people who we struggle to get into these kind of room for this kind of session really need to hear it the most. But
Yes,
that's
definitely.
sometimes the issue. But Sanya, thank you so much for joining us this morning, so early for you in
You're most
Trinidad. You're going to
welcome.
go outside now, get a coffee, and it'll be glorious sunshine.
Yes,
We
the sun is
are,
out. All of its
we
glory right
will,
now.
fantastic. We will have this session on our community page. We very soon, probably today or tomorrow, and soon we look after that. And yeah, if there's heaps, obviously, for the folks who are here, there are heaps of content and sessions on the community page as well, on our community group, if you haven't already joined. But Sanya, thank you so much for being with us. It was a pleasure.
You're most
And
welcome.
it's great to hear you again. And we'll hope to see you very, very soon. And thanks, folks, for
Yes.
joining us.
Yes, thank you all so much for just being a part of it and just, being up at different time zones. So very grateful for you all for coming through.